Important topics of the day, giving you better analysis and insight than anyone else, shining a spotlight into the darkness of D.C. and beyond. We're here to give you hope. Here are the three big things you need to know to start this day. Number one, in New Mexico, no limits on abortions, and in Oregon, a new law would allow a 10-year-old to get an abortion without parental consent. Enough already. Number two, the battle over transgender athletes competing in high school and college has reached critical mass, and the insanity is eating up a California Senate candidate. We'll get to that. Number three, just last week, the Democrat National Committee made its selection for the site of the 2024 convention for its presidential candidates. The Democrats, as I said at the time, picked the perfect metaphor for its entire party. A party that's based on failing liberal ideas like defund the police and give people more and more and more taxpayer-funded government assistance and take away any accountability. So, of course, Democrats chose the American war zone, better known as Chicago, a once proud symbol of American greatness that has been reduced to a place I would not go on a bet. I wouldn't go to Chicago for any reason. It's a city so violent that literally hundreds of people have been gunned down there already this year, and it's only mid-April. It's a city where violent crime is so out of control that they tossed out the incumbent mayor, Lori Lightfoot. But instead of changing directions, Chicago voters signed up for more chaos, violence, and destruction with an even more progressive mayor-elect. In fact, over the weekend, the violence that is often associated with the notorious South Side came spilling into the high-rent districts. Ah, yes, all planned on social media. Hundreds, maybe even a couple of thousand teenagers hell-bent on destruction came spilling into the heart of the famed Chicago Loop. This is where the well-heeled shop at the high-end stores and eat at fine restaurants. But this weekend was for the destruction of that myth. Cars were destroyed, tourists were attacked, and of course, more shots rang out. Yeah, Chicago, the city Democrats chose to be the site of the DNC convention for 24, and this weekend, the Chicago Loop terrorized by these young people. Terrorized. 2 or 3 were shot, others destroyed everything in their path. Listen to this.
And Karen, as you can imagine, is much calmer here than it was last night when hundreds of people descended onto the streets. It was the second night in a row large gatherings ended in violence. Madness near Millennium Park after large crowds of people were recorded on cell phone video, making a disarray of downtown Chicago. Police are still looking for the person who shot 2 teenage boys during the frenzy.
When I came back, this whole area was lined with, this street was blocked off by a wall of police up at the next block.
A similar gathering Friday night at 31st Street Beach, also ending in violence with a 14-year-old police say shot in his thigh. Both Mayor Lori Lightfoot and Mayor-elect Brandon Johnson responding tonight. Mayor Lightfoot saying in part, parents and guardians must know where their children are and be responsible for their actions.
Yeah, must be responsible for their actions. Yeah, okay, listen. This is commonplace in Chicago, especially on the south side of the city. In fact, it's daily. It's daily. ABC 7 is on the front lines of the war in Chicago. They're there. They're seeing this all the time. It's not getting better. It's getting worse. Listen.
Kate, Mark, good morning. Yeah, the 16-year-old not able to survive those injuries suffered in the shooting. You have a couple other teens who were also injured in shootings right on the south side. The latest one, where the 16-year-old died in, happening near 37th and Wabash just before midnight last night. Police telling us that there was 2 teens just walking around the area when a group of 5 to 6 people approached them and fired shots. A 15-year-old, last listed in good condition here at the hospital, was shot in the foot, and the 16-year-old again died from a gunshot wound to his abdomen area. Now, just hours before that, another shooting happening near 31st Street Beach. We saw reports and video of large crowds all over the area, groups of people just taking over near that beach. That's where a 14-year-old was shot in the thigh. He's last listed in fair condition here at the hospital. Police couldn't tell us what exactly led up to that shooting. All we know is there were those large crowds there. Now, no one has been arrested in either of these shootings, but we're starting to see that violence among youth as the warm weather comes to Chicago. According to our count, that's 93 juveniles who have been shot in the city this year, and 14 of them have died from their injuries.
Yeah. Listen to all that. Those are the teenagers that have died. Majority of those, like I say, on the South Side, notorious for violence and gangs and drugs and death and destruction. But to be clear, this over the weekend, this is Michigan Avenue. The high rent district, the place where law and order is still supposed to prevail. And yet, in this famed loop, the Chicago loop, was invaded by hundreds, if not a couple thousand teenagers. All coordinated on social media, attacking cars, violent fights in the streets, shootings as you've heard. Tourists were chased in fear for their lives as they should be. Police unable to bring it under control for a long period of time, 2 nights in a row. Expect more of this to come. And this is where the Democrats plan to hold their national convention, as they should. Because Chicago is the epitome of failure. The epitome of failure of liberal, left-wing, socialist, Democrat causes and agenda items. This is it. Oh, yeah. This is it. The victim crowd, the victim mentality, the victimhood point of view. Here it is, playing out. Attack everybody. We're entitled to everything. We're entitled to your city. We're entitled to your city. Yeah, you're not. And who's to blame? Not the criminals, of course, not the parents or the politicians that give this violent mob a pass and suggest if only there was more equity, then we could do better. These people are destroying our cities, and our country is not far behind. They, of course, point fingers at everyone except themselves. They accept no responsibility for any of this. Violence in the streets, teenagers giving police the finger and throwing bottles and rocks at anything they can, jumping up and down on cars passing by, terrorizing anybody that comes to the city. Yeah. And this is the way you want to run your country? This is not just happening in Chicago. It's happening in Seattle, Minneapolis, the violence in Atlanta recently, where they're trying to build a new police station and so forth. Attacked by mobs, by violent mobs. This is what you get when you defund the police. This is what you get when you don't put people in jail for the crimes they committed. This is what you get when you do bail reform, which really means letting people out with no bail at all. This is what you get. This is the perfect metaphor for the Democrat Party. Complete chaos, complete failure. This is where the Democrats belong in 2024 for their convention. Man, I look forward to Chicago showing its true 2023 colors in 2024. It'll be quite the performance, I'm quite sure. We need to clean up our act, America. I'm not done with this. I'll be back with more after the break. Don't go anywhere.
Confusion ever some